Okay, here we go. Get ready to turn left. Turn left. Keep left, and then turn left. Turn left. Here we are, safe and sound. Let's do this. Okay, let's find a new route. Keep right, and then exit right. Exit right. Turn left.
partisan, but they're very influenced by the talk and the culture in the United States right now than Trump himself. And if he was willing to make a statement that really reset things at the convention where other Republicans could use that kind of permission to do the same, it would just be a tremendous difference. And of course, that hasn't really happened.
What specifically is a way to reset, though, whether it's Trump or somebody else? How do you get out of a violent cycle that just increases and increases politically?
So there's two things that have been shown very clearly in the research to bring down justifications for violence. Now, justifications aren't the same as violence because the people who commit violence tend to be a little more impulsive and more aggressive. They're often not very partisan, but they're very influenced by the talk and the kind of heat in the general atmosphere. So the two things that are shown to work are first, leaders making statements, which is why I started with Trump being so important. People don't really care about the other side and what they say. If you finger wave at the other side, it doesn't do any good. But they care a lot about the norms their own side sets, what it means to be part of that group. And so for each side to make it very clear that violence has no place within their side is hugely important. The other thing that makes a big difference is correcting misperceptions. Americans see these politicians behaving badly, like J.D. Vance blaming the other side right away, and they think that's indicative of all people of that tribe. And it's not. We know that almost all Americans actually disagree with political violence when you ask them to be serious about it. And most of the Republicans and Democrats have much more nuanced views than their leaders who are much more extreme and ideological. So correcting those misperceptions so Americans understand the difference between their neighbors and the leaders has also been shown to do a lot to take down political violence.
We specifically talked about Trump's response. You said that it's more important than not to take cues from the leader of your own political tribe, but I do want to ask what you made of President Biden's response in the hours following the shooting, the days following the shooting, including that Oval Office address asking the country to take the temperature down.
So I'm glad he asked the country to take the temperature down. It was the right thing to do. He's certainly used some language that I wouldn't have used about targeting Trump and so on. I think that was a bit unhelpful. But it was good that he made the statement. It was good that Obama and Clinton came out right away with statements, and the Democratic leaders have been quite condemning of the violence. Obviously, rank and file, there have been conspiracy theories and other types of things on the internet as well.
Is there anything that individual voters can do to try and individually lead to a less violent political system?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is a moment when I think years have probably been looking at our political life as if it's a car heading over a precipice and they want to cover their eyes. But we're the passengers in that car. And so we really need to take the wheel. And there's a lot we can do. I mean, the first thing we can do is demand that our politicians and leaders tone down the rhetoric, stop the harassment, the threats, the dehumanizing language. You can also stop voting for those people. You can stop giving them money. This is how you express your views in a democracy, is through the electoral process, not at the barrel of a gun. We could also require our leaders ahead of time to accept the outcomes of elections. We know that a belief that elections are fraudulent is extraordinarily likely to lead to violence globally, so pre-accepting those outcomes, whatever they are, is important. And I think we can also actually stop spreading conspiracies. This had been a big problem more on the right. It is now getting to be a bigger problem on the left, especially after this assassination attempt. And what we know about conspiracy theories is, first of all, they're quite correlated with violence. And second of all, once you believe one, you believe more than one. So when people start speculating about an incident like this and say things that you think are real conspiratorial, you can call them out. And again, just like politicians, you need to call out your own side. Nobody really cares when you call out the other.
That's Rachel Kleinfeld of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, an expert on political violence and democracies. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The surrealist artist Salvador Dali was known for art featuring melting clocks, bizarre landscapes, and dreamlike imagery. He died in 1989, but visitors at the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, can ask him questions about his art or anything else. NPR's Chloe Veltman reports that Ask Dali uses generative AI to bring the artist back to life.
The question, why are the clocks in your paintings melting, provokes
evokes a long, poetical response from Ask Dali. Here's a snippet.
My dear questioner, think not
Get
of
ready
the
to
clocks
turn
as
right.
merely melting. Picture them as a vast dream, caressing consciousness.
Museum visitors just
Turn
pick
right.
up the lobster-shaped receiver on a replica of Dali's famous telephone sculpture to speak with him. The museum says the artificial intelligence Dali has responded to well over 30,000 questions since the installation launched in mid-April. People ask about things like the artist's famous curling moustache.
It is not merely facial hair, but a symbol, a whimsical whisker bridge to pass artistic geniuses.
And the week's winning lottery numbers.
To seek the lottery numbers from the mind of Dali is to ask a cloud to rain gold. Let us instead divine the mysteries of the universe through art and imagination.
Ask Dali was trained on voice samples taken from archival interviews Dali did in English over his career. Also translations of his many writings, including Diary of a Genius and The Secret Life of Salvador Dali. Martin Pegg Ludvigsen was part of the team that created the installation.
One of the most wonderful things about this experience is that Dali will never give the exact same answer to a question, even if it's phrased exactly the same as before.
He says that's because of the way the technology works.
But we like to think it's because of his spirit and temperament.
But what would Salvador Dali have thought of his AI self? Here's Dali scholar Elliot King.
He was so interested in scientific advancements, and I think that he would have really enjoyed the fact that people were talking into this lobster phone.
Hi, I am Salvador Dali, and you can ask me anything.
Dali spoke English, along with Catalan, Spanish and French, but King says no way would the real Dali have introduced himself to people like the AI Dali does to museum goers.
That word "hi" sounds so odd coming out of his voice. He always said bonjour.
King says Dali also said bonjour when saying goodbye. Chloe Veltman, NPR News.
You're listening to All Things Considered from NPR News.
It's 5:44 and this is News 88.7 in Denver. I'm Gail DeLong. Centerport has restored power to more than 2.2 million customers since Hurricane Beryl. That still leaves thousands without
provide these services, me and my team, has just been devastating for our clientele.
A preliminary estimate by the Perryman
Get
Group
ready
puts
to
the lost
turn right.
earnings for Texans due to Beryl at more than $1.3 billion. For News 88.7 In Depth, I'm Andrew Schneider.
And at last check, Centerpoint says 8,969
Turn right.
customers are still without power. It's 5:48 on a Thursday afternoon, and it's All Things Considered on News 88.7. 89 degrees right now here at the UH campus with a heat index of 94. I'm Dick Pittman, and still ahead on the program, more details continue to emerge on the assassination attempt on former President Trump, including questions around the Secret Service's responsibility.
Ultimately, it is the Secret Service that's responsible for the protection plan here and for making sure that such a dangerous rooftop vantage point is secured.
We'll have more on the investigation following top-of-the-hour news from NPR News 88.7's Gail DeWater.
As Hurricane Beryl made its way through Greater Houston, Houston Public Media was there with you.
Much of the Houston area is on the dirty side of the storm, which means higher winds, more rain.
Unless you're, a first responder, stay off the roads as much as possible. We can't emphasize that enough.
We have over 20 boats, so we're in a much better position to respond now than we were just a few years ago.
Keeping you informed and helping your family stay safe before, during, and after the storm on News 88.7 and HoustonPublicMedia.org.
Support comes from MD Anderson Cancer Center, where a single blood donation at MD Anderson Cancer Center can help make a life-saving difference for cancer patients. Information on donating blood, appointments, and more at mdandersongiveblood.com. Tonight on Houston Public Media, TV8. It's the final night of the Republican National Convention from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The PBS NewsHour team presents live coverage with the latest updates and analysis. Tonight beginning at 7 on TV8.
And our coverage will kick in at 8 o'clock this evening, followed by a special call-in edition of The Middle at 10 o'clock here on News 88.7. It's 5:50.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detro.
And I'm Maurice Shapiro. A former political prisoner held in China alleges in a new lawsuit that an American company used forced prison labor in China. He is suing the American company, saying it should have known its supply chain contained forced labor. NPR's Emily Fang reports.
3 years ago, Shi Minglei fled China for the U.S. Her husband, the Chinese human rights campaigner Cheng Yuan, had been sent to prison for his activism. And she learned that in prison in China, her husband is working long hours.
So the food is limited food and lots of physical abuse. So he lost weight.
Her husband was imprisoned alongside Li Mingzhe, a Taiwanese social worker who was arrested in China for his political ties to pro-democracy activists. And Li says he was forced to make shoes for the Chinese military as well as to make gloves.
As soon as we got out of bed in prison, we had 20-something minutes to get ready and eat. Then we worked all day at the sewing machines.
He says this work was not voluntary.
If you missed your work quota, you would likely be denied family visitation, the right to buy food at the commissary, or even beaten with electric batons. It was all about making profit for the prison.
Li worked like this for 4 years until 2022 when he was released. And back in Taiwan, he got in touch with Shi. One of Li's tasks in prison had been to attach a brand trademark and company tags their suppliers.
If we can figure it out, then Milwaukee Tool should definitely have been able to figure it out if they were actually looking for forced labor.
Milwaukee Tool said in a statement to NPR that the claims of forced labor were, quote, meritless, and it, quote, found no evidence of forced labor, but that it had independently, quote, terminated a relationship with the accused supplier. The lawsuit's plaintiff alleges he saw paper invoices which showed the Milwaukee-branded gloves he was forced to make in prison were commissioned by another company, Safety INXS. INXS makes protective clothing. It was bought 3 years ago by a French company named Dentrisangle, and its financial records do show one of its clients for gloves is Milwaukee's parent company.
Companies that have relied on very long attenuated supply chains for producing goods in the most cost-effective manner, I think are facing a new reality.
This is E. Benjamin Skinner, the founder of Transparentum, a nonprofit that investigates human rights abuses in supply chains. That complexity of supply chains makes it hard for companies themselves to know who is making their stuff.
Look hard at what is going into their products in terms of the labor conditions, and don't rely on traditional audits for that. Go yourself and critically work with independent civil society actors.
Dentrisangle said it did do due diligence before buying INXS in 2021, found no evidence of forced labor, and said that it audits more than 90% of its supply chains every 3 years. But that is not assuaged Shuminle, whose husband is due to be released this summer.
I live in Minneapolis, and Milwaukee Tool is very near. It's just 5 hours away. It feels really evil. It's so near.
And so she is closely watching the lawsuit against Milwaukee Tool. Emily Fang, NPR News, Taipei, Taiwan.
The impact of climate change is so big that scientists are finding it is even affecting the rotation of the planet. It's causing the days to get longer. Lauren Summer reports from NPR's Climate Desk.
One day is 24 hours, right? Well, not exactly, according to Surendra Adhikari of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
If you want to be more precise, the length of day changes every day, basically. Today is maybe slightly longer or shorter than yesterday.
That's because the Earth is a dynamic place. Its spin can be slowed down or sped up by what's happening deep inside its core, or by the moon's gravity. And the change is measured in milliseconds, or 1,000th of a second.
So it changes by very, very little amount, very tiny bit.
Now, something else is changing the Earth's spin. As humans burn fossil fuels and add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, the planet is heating up, and massive amounts of ice are melting in Greenland and Antarctica.
When ice melts, the water is bound to go into the ocean. So that would mean the mass is being transported from the both poles towards the equator.
That added water around the equator makes the planet wider around the middle, and that slows its spin. So climate change is making the days longer.
It's just a testament to the gravity of climate change in a sense.
Adhikari found if greenhouse gas emissions stay high, days will be 2.5 milliseconds longer per century, which he published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. That's not something most people would notice. But Judah Levine, a physicist at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, says it does affect how we live.
Everyday life is not sensitive at the 1 second level. Technology maybe, and people use technology and they don't quite realize the sensitivity.
Computer systems that run financial transactions, GPS, cell phone networks, they all rely on syncing up using time. So changing time with a leap second can be a huge technological headache. Climate change will now need to be factored into those conversations, Levine says, but it's not the biggest thing to pay attention to.
If you live in a low-lying coastal area, then you're not concerned about leap seconds, okay? I mean, that's the least of your worries, okay? You have much more serious problems to deal with.
Because of melting ice, oceans could rise 2 feet or more by the end of the century, flooding land where millions of people live. Lauren Summer, NPR News.
It's the final night of the Republican
this involves the risk of loss. From Viking, committed to exploring the world in comfort, offering small ship experiences with a shore excursion included in every port, and programs designed for cultural enrichment. Learn more at Viking.com. From Progressive Insurance, home of the Name Your Price tool, so drivers can see coverage options at Progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law. And from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Minute before 6 on the day before Friday, and it's All Things Considered on your NPR station, News 88.7.
As they go through retirement, baby boomers are living large by spending their savings. A look at how boomers are driving the economy next time on Marketplace.
That's coming your way in half an hour, followed by the Daily at 7 o'clock. Today Explained at 7:30, and our coverage of the final night of the RNC at 8 o'clock. 8:22 for the sunset, about a 40% chance of showers and storms overnight. Cloudy otherwise with a low of 76. Tomorrow's sunrise at 6:33, 40% chance of rain tomorrow. Highs around 90. Could feel as hot as 101, factoring in that humidity. And by the time we get to Sunday, that chance of rain goes up to about 70% or so. Right now it's 89, heat index 94 here at the UH campus. On your NPR station, KUHF Houston, News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
It is perhaps the defining moment of the 2024 election for Donald Trump. It means he can be a hero and a martyr at the same time.
Tonight, for the third time, Donald Trump will officially become the Republican Party's nominee for President of the United States.
It's Thursday, July 18th, and this is All Things Considered from NPR News.
Shapiro.
And I'm Scott Tetra. This hour, the latest on the investigation into the assassination attempt against Trump.
And while Republicans hold their convention in Milwaukee, supporters of President Biden are out knocking on doors around the city.
I'm all in for Biden until something radical changes, and I think that's the only approach we can do.
Plus, did Houston learn any lessons from Hurricane Beryl?
They've chosen to do things like spend billions of dollars on new gas plants that don't help when there's a hurricane.
Later, the story of an alien-looking creature that washed up on a New Zealand beach.
We will tell you all about it after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Jack Spear. At a Republican National Convention that has been highly choreographed, tonight's grand finale will likely feature more of that. President Donald Trump is obviously the headliner. For the past several nights, he's appeared with his ear bandaged after surviving an assassination attempt this past weekend in Pennsylvania. Other speakers, like the Reverend Franklin Graham, say despite Trump's felony conviction, connection with payoffs to a porn star, those opposed to abortion believe he played a pivotal role.
Roe versus Wade had to be defeated, and he put the judges in place to make that happen. So I credit Donald J. Trump for that. No other president has been able to do that.
Trump, during his speech tonight, though, may shy away from the controversial abortion issue. There are reports Trump has altered his speech since the attempt on his life, including fewer attacks against President Biden and more calls for unity. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is commenting on reports she privately told President Biden his continued candidacy would hurt the party's chances of retaking the House. NPR's Deidre Walsh explains.
Pelosi is one of a handful of top Democratic leaders talking to Biden. CNN reports she told the president he cannot beat Trump. Pelosi's spokesperson told NPR she respects the confidentiality of her conversations and says, quote, the feeding frenzy from the press based on anonymous sources misrepresents any conversation the speaker may have had with the president. Pelosi has not publicly said she believes Biden should remain the nominee. Concern among Democrats is mounting about keeping Biden at the top of the ticket. Deirdre Walsh, NPR News.
U.S. diplomats have not been able to attend the trial of a Wall Street Journal reporter in Moscow. The case is being held behind closed doors. More from NPR's Michelle Kellerman.
The trial is moving quickly in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg. State Department spokesman Vedant Patel says the last time the U.S. ambassador saw Evan Gershkovich was in May.
This whole legal process is a sham for Evan. He is being wrongfully detained. He did nothing wrong. We have been clear about that from the onset.
He He's also calling for the release of former Marine Paul Whelan, who was arrested at the end of 2018. Russia has hinted at a possible prisoner swap and says talks are ongoing. The U.S. accuses Russia of arresting Americans to use as political pawns. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
The number of people filing initial weekly claims for unemployment benefits ticked up again. The Labor Department reporting today first-time jobless claims for the week ending July 13th rose by 20,000 to 243,000. The number of Americans collecting unemployment benefits also went up. Stocks continue to lose ground in what appears to now be a more widespread decline as investors look to rebalance their portfolios. The Dow dropped 533 points today. The Nasdaq was down 125 points. You're listening to NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gail DeBark. Members of Houston's congressional delegation met today with Centerport officials to talk about the company's response to Hurricane Beryl. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia spoke with Centerport CEO Jason Wells about the response.
To their credit, he didn't use the words. He said, "We failed the community," and I agree with him. This meeting we had today, we should have had 2 months ago to prepare.
Right now, a little over 8,000 Centerport customers are still without power. It could take 6 to 8 weeks before piles of storm debris are collected. News 88.7's Patricia Ortiz says Houston City Council has approved a contract that could cost up to $120 million to be reimbursed by FEMA.
The increased budget is one of the first steps to building capacity for cleanup. But Councilmember Tiffany Thomas says the long wait could lead to non-storm related trash ending up in places they shouldn't be.
They weren't in District F, but I had made a post about the debris update. Someone sent it to the inbox, and when I was looking at the photo, I'm like, this is not debris. This is someone's stuff. Y'all just put it in the media to be picked up.
Thomas says the debris is widespread through many neighborhoods in the city and might take a few weeks because there's still some cleanup being done after the derecho that hit a few weeks ago. I'm Patricia Ortiz, News 88.7.
Local health officials say there's been a big spike in COVID cases. Houston vaccine expert Dr. Peter Hotez says new variants are more adept at infecting people.
Now it's reasonably high, although possibly starting to plateau. But the point is there is a lot of COVID transmission.
The CDC says a COVID virus is currently spreading throughout the state at very high levels. Houstonians are encouraged to stay up to date on vaccines and boosters. Our chance of rain tonight stands at 40%. It'll be cloudy, overnight low around 76 degrees. A 40% chance of rain for Friday, partly cloudy skies, high around 91. And a 40% chance of rain tomorrow night, overnight low near 76. I'm Gail DeLore, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. This is NPR.
This is All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Ari Shapiro.
I'm Scott Detrow. In a minute, we will introduce you to a brand new dinosaur species. It's a small one for a dinosaur. It looks like an ostrich with the tail of a Komodo dragon. That is right, 2 days in a row here of breaking dinosaur news. But first, to the Republican National Convention, which wraps up tonight in Wisconsin. Former President Donald Trump will accept his party's nomination for president, and he is expected to deliver a deeply personal message, according to the campaign, that will be shaped by the assassination attempt on his life over the weekend. Joining us now is NPR's Sarah McCammon. Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Scott.
What are we expecting to hear from Trump tonight?
You know, Trump has been on the floor each evening this week greeting his supporters, but tonight he will address the full convention and formally accept the Republican Party's nomination. Now, one thing we've seen this week is that the base is fully behind him. You know, several of his former rivals for the nomination spoke on his behalf, and there's just been a lot of enthusiasm in the room. But one question is how much Trump will reach out to undecided or swing voters beyond his base. You know, Michael Austin is a delegate from Kansas, and he told me earlier he thinks Trump should focus on the bread and butter issues that appeal to voters across the spectrum.
We all want it to be cheaper when we go to our grocery store. We want it to be cheaper when we put gas in our car. As long as he can stick on those economic issues, things that all Americans are reeling from, I think that he'll be very successful in reaching out.
And that's important because, as you know, Scott, the purpose of a party convention is not just rallying the base, but also getting ready for the general rerouting.
Right, like you said, we've been seeing Trump each night. We've heard a little bit of him here and there, but this will be the first major speech since that assassination attempt. How have people at the convention been talking about that?
Of course, it is on people's minds. Each night that Trump has walked onto the convention floor, he's been wearing a bandage on his ear. And for Trump supporters who see him as a fighter and are drawn to that aspect of his personality, and for some who even see him as somehow divinely chosen to lead, something you hear from Trump supporters sometimes, this has just reinforced those ideas. I talked earlier with Sharon Cassidy, a delegate from Guam, and here's what she told me.
To have a president that actually gets wounded on Saturday and then shows up on Monday and has been every day of our convention, he's resilient and he's a man that is a leader. He's strong and he's what we need right now.
This was a very close call that Trump survived. He came here as scheduled, and even some of his critics acknowledge that he's come through this event looking, as Sharon Cassidy just said, looking strong. Charlie Sykes is a conservative commentator and a longtime Trump critic.
a new route.
He brought this up last night at a forum here in Milwaukee for Never Trump conservatives.
Don't downplay it. Don't look away from it. It is perhaps the defining moment of the 2024 election, and for Donald Trump, it means that he can be a hero and a martyr at the same time.
Now, this has also been a big theme on the convention floor. We've heard delegates chanting, fight, fight, fight. Multiple speakers have brought it up. And it's also arguably humanized Trump to some degree. You know, his granddaughter Kai made a very personal speech last night where she talked about her shock at what happened to her grandfather. And she also said she sees a side of him that people don't often see.
This is the last night you've been taking in the convention each night, talking to people. What are your takeaways?
It is hard not to notice just how overwhelmingly Trump now dominates the Republican Party. His critics have been pretty much entirely absent, including some high-profile Republicans like former Vice President Mike Pence. You know, we both covered the 2016 campaign, Scott, and overall, the energy at this convention feels different to me. Delegates just seem to be feeling very positive, very confident.
This much unity around Donald Trump, and that's it here. Correspondent Sarah McCammon. Thanks, Sarah.
We're learning more details today about the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump last Saturday, and the new information raises questions about the Secret Service's apparent decision to allow Trump to take the stage. NPR's Martin Costi is in Butler County, Pennsylvania, where the shooting took place. Hi, Martin. Hey, Ari. What more can you tell us about how the gunman was allowed to get onto that rooftop that had a view of the stage?
Well, I'd say we're closer to an answer. Initially, the Secret Service was pointing out that that building was outside their perimeter and was the responsibility of local law enforcement. And the inference there was somehow the local law enforcement maybe had dropped the ball. But officials here in Butler have been pushing back. Just yesterday, the township manager put out a statement saying Butler officers were never assigned to those buildings, that they were assigned to traffic duty nearby. And yet when the alert went out about a suspicious male around those buildings, those police officers, quote, broke free from traffic duty and went searching for him, and that one of them tried to climb up onto the roof after him. The gunman then pointed his rifle at the officer, according to the statement, and he then had to let go of the edge of the roof and fell to the ground. And they say that's when the gunman started firing into the rally.
Wow, does that mean local law enforcement is effectively off the hook?
Well, not necessarily. That's just the Butler Township Police. That's a small department. We don't know for sure yet what exactly the assignments were for the Sheriff's Department or State Police in those buildings. But ultimately, it is the Secret Service that's responsible for the protection plan here and for making sure that such a dangerous rooftop vantage point is secured.
And the Secret Service, along with the FBI yesterday, briefed members of Congress about the assassination attempt. What information has come out of that briefing?
I think the biggest revelation is confirmation that there was prior warning about the 20-year-old man who ultimately shot Trump. Right after that private briefing yesterday, Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn posted on X, quote, "I am appalled to learn that the Secret Service knew about a threat prior to President Trump walking on stage," unquote. And from what we've been able to piece together, the gunman was spotted, but not with a visible gun, well before Trump started speaking. Agents then lost sight of him. Trump was allowed to go on stage, and when members of the public spotted the man on the roof with the rifle, an alert was raised, and yet Trump was allowed to remain on stage. And I think that's going to be the big question going forward. How and why was the decision made not to rush Trump off the stage as soon as a threat had been reported?
Absolutely. Now, the gunman, 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, was killed by a Secret Service
images of President Biden, from President Donald Trump, even Kate Middleton, the Princess of Wales. He'd searched for dates of Trump speaking events as well as the Democratic National Convention. They say they found no signs of any strong political ideology or foreign connections, but they say he did search for the term major depressive disorder.
Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle ultimately oversees the team responsible for protecting
to appear before a House panel on Monday. Several Republicans have been already asking or calling for her to resign. So this fight and this investigation pretty much moving now from Butler to Washington.
You've been reporting these last couple days in this small town outside of Pittsburgh where the shooting took place, Butler, Pennsylvania. What's it like there right now?
Well, this is a semi-rural area, sort of a patchwork of townships in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania. It's not the kind of place where they're used to being in the limelight. Local law enforcement officials here have told me that they felt absolutely slammed, not just by media requests from international news, but also by the pressures of being caught up in the middle of a Washington-style blame game. At first, they were content to let the investigation run its course, they said, but they quickly realized that they sort of needed to shift to try to get their version of events out ahead of things. So that's what we've been seeing over the last few days.
Keep right.
NPR's Martin Cosby, thanks for your reporting.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Exit right.
This month.
It was a small dinosaur. It was about 7 feet long, so probably would have been as long as Shaq would have been if he was laying down.
A Shaq-sized dinosaur, still smaller than the rest, and that's a big deal.
Because bigger dinosaurs preserve better. You know, if you can imagine like taking a chicken bone out to your garden and leaving it in the soil, and then also taking a cow leg and leaving it there too, come back 3 months later, and it's more likely that you won't find that chicken bone, but you might still find that cow femur.
Avrahami and his team believe this new dino was a burrowing species, spending at least part of its life underground. He says paleontologists just don't know a lot about small plant-eating dinosaurs like this one.
Their family tree is basically like a giant black hole in paleontology knowledge.
This is the 32-year-old's first ever dinosaur discovery, and as part of the team that identified her, he also got to name her. Used the opportunity to honor his mother, who's from Guam.
The name Photna comes from our ancestral creation mythology, which is about a brother and a sister spirit. Photna is the sister and Pontan is the brother. And when Pontan dies, Photna uses the parts of his body to craft the pieces of the universe and the pieces of the island. At the end of this, she dies herself and becomes fossilized. And from her petrified body springs forth the Chamorro people. And I thought this story was so cool because it closely mirrors the life of Photna the dinosaur, because Photna was found in a burrow, so it had close familial bonds, and it also was preserved within the earth.
So Avrahami hopes that from his team's discovery springs more knowledge about this small burrowing dinosaur and the life that it led millions of years ago.
And if you're in the area, you can see Photna Herzage for yourself at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences.
At 6:18 on a Thursday afternoon, it's All Things Considered on your NPR station, News 87. 90 Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius right now here at the UH campus. Heat index 96 and 36. I'm Dave Putman out on the freeways, heading in southbound 45 through Montgomery County into Harris County. You're in for about a 35-minute trip from Research Forest to Louetta. We've got a wreck at Cypresswood blocking the two right lanes. Coming up next, we'll remember comedian and actor Bob Newhart, who died today at the age of 94.
PBS NewsHour.
Now more than ever, you need news you can trust.
PBS NewsHour.
Unbiased, in-depth
over sensationalism.
PBS NewsHour.
Cutting through the noise with news that matters. World-class journalism that brings unrivaled national and global perspective home to you.
PBS NewsHour.
Elections, conflict, climate. Trust a news source that provides fair, thoughtful coverage of the events that impact our lives.
PBS NewsHour. Weeknights at 6 on Houston Public Media TV 8.
I'm Jeremy Hobson. What a week from the assassination attempt on former President Trump to Trump accepting the Republican nomination for president for a third time. We'll be live with a special edition of The Middle right after Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention. Taking your calls at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Join us for a special edition of The Middle.
That's set to begin at 10 o'clock tonight. Our coverage of the RNC itself begins at 8.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Porter Law Firm, helping with business investments, real estate transactions, construction matters, and planning for the next generation. More at porterfirm.com. Real investment.
Support comes from Houston Community
At the
College
roundabout,
with 8
take
areas of
second.
study, offering students 280 degree plans and career choices, online or in person. Sign up information and more at hccs.edu.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from Subaru, featuring the 2025 Subaru Outback Wilderness. With standard symmetrical all-wheel drive and all-terrain tires, it's designed for paths not yet taken. Learn more at subaru.com/wilderness. And from USPS, dedicated to providing businesses with shipping options, working to help businesses turn shipping into an advantage with USPS Ground Advantage. Learn more at usps.com/advantage. This is NPR.
It's All Things Considered from NPR News. I'm Scott Detrow.
And I'm Ari Shapiro. Comic Bob Newhart has died at the age of 94. He was best known for an everyman persona that powered 2 classic TV series.
Turn right.
a psychologist surrounded by strange patients. As Newhart told WHYY's Fresh Air in 1998, picking his character's occupation was key.
He said, well, Bob is he's a listener. He's like a reactor. He reacts to people. What occupation would lend itself to somebody who listens? And they said, well, how about a psychiatrist? I said, well, let's make him a psychologist, because I think a psychologist tends to deal with less severely disturbed people.
Dr. Hartley's patients were more like eccentric oddballs, as in this scene featuring an overly polite family arriving for a therapy session.
Good morning, Dr. Hartley.
It seems to be working.
After you, honey. No, the children must go first. No, Mother, after you. Oh, yes, we insist that our beloved parents.
It's a good thing they weren't on the Titanic.
The Bob Newhart Show ended in 1978 after 6 seasons by Newhart's choice. 4 years later, he was in another sitcom, just called Newhart. This time he was playing Vermont innkeeper and TV talk show host Dick Loudon. That show ran 8 seasons. Its famous final scene was suggested by Newhart's real-life wife, Virginia. It featured Newhart's character waking up in his bed from the Bob Newhart Show, lying next to Suzanne Plachette, who played his wife on the 1970s sitcom.
I was an innkeeper in this crazy little town in Vermont. The maid was an heiress. Her husband talked in alliteration. The handyman kept missing the point of things. That settles it. No more Japanese food before you go to bed.
Newhart had other TV series, but they didn't last long. Still, he worked steadily as a stand-up comic and character actor, appearing on shows like ER and Desperate Housewives. In 2006, he released a memoir called I Shouldn't Even Be Doing This, and that same year, he appeared on the Emmy Awards in an inspired bit with Conan O'Brien.
Tonight, I have placed beloved TV icon Bob Newhart in an airtight container. If the Emmys run 1 second over, Bob Newhart dies.
It would be another 7 years before Newhart won his first Emmy Award in 2013 for his guest appearance on The Big Bang Theory. The next year, NPR host David Green asked Newhart if there were any failures in his life or career that troubled him.
No, I've lived in an incredible time. I lived in the days of Johnny Carson, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin. Incredibly rewarding times. Oh my God, I can never look upon my life as a failure. It's far beyond anything I ever thought I would attain.
Such humility was a fitting attitude for a performer who became a comedy legend by acting like the button-down guy next door. I'm Eric Deggans.
Years ago today, I was one of 42,000 fans crowded into the old Yankee Stadium on a steamy Sunday afternoon.
Larson will throw out the first pitch of this game in commemoration of 1956, when Larson pitched this perfect game, the only one ever pitched in World Series history.
14-year-old me had taken the bus into the Bronx from the New Jersey suburbs to catch it all from the right field stands. Yankee pitcher David Cohn took the mound. He appeared to be in trouble early on when the Montreal Expos' second batter hit a liner to right field.
Lofted out into right field, long run throw, nailed it, he'll get there. What a play by Paul O'Neill.
I kept score that day and remember writing a 9 and circling it with my pencil, fly ball out to the right fielder, drawing a little star right next to it because the play was so good. Expo after Expo kept coming to the plate. David Cohn got every single one of them out.
24 in a row by David Cohn.
Game that had started with the recreation of the rarest
Dolly tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News.
And we'll also have local news with Matt Hareb along with your host Jared Carroll tomorrow morning starting at 5 and right after that.
From Astros mascot Orbit's inspired reversal against booing Rangers fans at the All-Star game to Elon Musk announcing he's relocating more companies to Texas. Our non-expert panel weighs in on the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all on the next Houston Matters.
Tomorrow morning at 9.
Support comes from MD Anderson Cancer Center, where a single blood donation at MD Anderson Cancer Center can help make a life-saving difference for cancer patients. Information on donating blood, appointments, and more at mdandersongiveblood.com. Support comes from Holocaust Museum Houston, featuring Facing Survival, artist David Cassin's poignant stories and portraits of Holocaust survivors. On view now. Details at hmh.org.
Southbound 45 heading in North Freeway, slow and go after the Hardy. We've got a wreck after Cypresswood in the 2 right lanes. Mid 6:30.
Marketplace is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. Millions will be traveling this summer. Bitwarden offers secure logins while in transit or at the beach. Learn more at bitwarden.com.
Unemployment ticking up, consumers pulling back on spending. Is it enough for a rate cut? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace. economic data points came out this week. The Fed's Beige Book, which we talked a bit about yesterday. In it, most Federal Reserve Bank districts noted retailers offering discounts and price-sensitive consumers. People are bargain hunting or buying fewer or lower quality items. This is happening even though inflation continues to cool. Prices have been coming down, according to the latest Consumer Price Index. So why exactly is price sensitivity lingering? Marketplace's Elizabeth Trovel has the story.
Pretty much anyone who eats can be price sensitive. Even economists who track inflation, like Kayla Brune with Morning Consult, who used to grab a bite at a cafe close to her.
And they used to have a $5 grilled cheese. And I love grilled cheese.
First, they bumped it up to $6.
And then like a month ago, they raised it to $7. And I was like, I just can't pay this.
Brune is very aware of the baseline price of the sandwich, $5, and how much it's gone up. She says consumers feel the same thing when they go to the store.
Go straight on. And their baseline isn't necessarily from a year ago. It might be from 2019 or, 2021.
Economists measure inflation year to year and month to month, while consumers may think about the change in prices from 3 years ago or longer. That makes visits to the supermarket painful.
Go and see a large container of detergent costing $25, and I can't get used to it.
Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff says macroeconomic data isn't calming to consumers when they're walking down the grocery aisle.
They don't want to have to think about if prices are going down. Should I be happy that they're not going up as fast?
It's no wonder they're shopping for discounts or lower quality products and are emotional about it.
This generation, especially younger people, have just never seen inflation before, much less inflation like this.
And they're more sensitive to its day versus coming out of the pandemic when people took a more seize-the-day approach to spending. Michael Gapin is with Bank of America.
The rate of inflation has come down, but the price level's high, so consumer sentiment is still saying, great, inflation slowed, but I'm still adjusting to this higher price level. Now maybe we're half to 2/3 of the way through that story.
He thinks consumers will adjust, but it might take a while. I'm Elizabeth Troval for Marketplace.
more is because many of them bought their homes outright with cash, a far larger percentage than, average for America. So they're sort of mortgage rate agnostic, which makes them much more mobile, much more flexible, and for many different reasons, often less student loans, flush retirement portfolios or investment portfolios that build up, over a 10-year bull market. They have this cash that makes them much less likely to be deterred by higher mortgage rates.
Talk about the reaction you've gotten to the story.
It's been really interesting. Everything from like those people are spending my inheritance to you go 80-year-old skydiving person, like goals, hashtag goals.
Heather Gillers is a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
announced today that its revenue fell by almost a quarter this past year as shippers switched to alternative routes. The cost of shipping goods around the globe is surging, and what's causing this is a perfect storm of conditions, including worries about actual storms and a lot more. Marketplace's Sabri Benishore has that one.
This is the gate to the Red Hook Terminal in Brooklyn, New York. There are two giant cranes towering over it, one red, one blue. Behind them is the New York City skyline. Everything from seafood to lumber comes here on ships from the Caribbean and South America. Empty trucks drive into the terminal and they come out full of that cargo, headed to the city and beyond. Getting those goods here has become very expensive.
The cost of shipping a container from Shanghai to New York, for example, has tripled this year.
Tim DeNoyer is a senior analyst at ACT Research. A container that cost $3,000 to ship at the beginning of the year now costs $7,800, about half the level of the dystopian prices of the pandemic, but still
significant for sure.
The most obvious cause is in the Red Sea.
The Houthis are firing missiles at basically every Western commercial vessel that tries to go into the Red Sea right now to transit the Suez Canal.
Ships that would go through the Suez now go around South Africa. Bill Baelish is a shipping consultant with shipwithbill.com. He's had to explain to customers why ocean freight has gotten so expensive.
The boat has to be rerouted. It's going to take a longer time. Now you're talking additional fuel costs, additional labor costs. Those workers are stuck on the ship now for a longer period of time.
But a boat going from Shanghai to New York does not need to go to the Suez Canal. Neither do a lot of other trade routes. And yet, ocean shipping prices nearly everywhere have surged. Ryan Peterson is CEO of Flexport.
That's because it's a global market for shipping, and so they're taking some ships that would normally be going across the Pacific and routing them to support the extra capacity needed for the longer journey around Africa. That's actually reducing the supply of shipping effectively.
But the Red Sea troubles were only the start. A drought in Panama this year lowered water levels in the Panama Canal. There were storms in Asia. And on top of everything else, retailers in many places have decided to bring their goods in early.
Seasonal front loading?
Beth Ann Rooney is director of the Port Department for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Retailers are looking at a predicted nastier than normal hurricane season and upcoming labor negotiations at East and Gulf Coast ports. It has them thinking about Christmas.
So typically in U.S. ports, Christmas is happening in July and August, maybe the first 2 weeks of September. So it appears as if shippers are trying to get ahead of that Christmas rush.
That has just made the imbalance of supply and demand worse. And so, with one hit after another, the sprawling network of global trade has been knocked off balance. While U.S. ports have not become congested, other key ports have, Singapore, Sri Lanka. It's showing up not just in prices, but in the very containers in which goods move.
Containers being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Eric Oak is a supply chain analyst with S&P Global Market Intelligence. Just as goods move around the world, empty containers have to move too. With ships being diverted, the empty containers aren't always getting to where they need to go.
Without those containers to load with goods to ship and then unload, obviously the wheels of global trade grind to the halt.
So far, ocean trade has not ground to a halt. It's just gotten a lot more expensive. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
September, the Authors Guild, along with 17 authors, filed a class action lawsuit against OpenAI. They accused the company of copyright infringement, claiming that their writing was used to train AI models without their consent or compensation. They've since filed an amendment to add Microsoft to the list of defendants. While that case is ongoing, authors are worried about the future of the industry and their own livelihoods. Rebecca Ackerman wrote about what AI means for authors and the book publishing industry in Esquire the other day. Rebecca, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
What are some of the concerns that authors have
I think the first one is really about confusion. AI as a whole doesn't feel like it makes a lot of sense to people who are outside of the tech industry because it can mean a lot of different things. So I think first off, authors aren't really sure what the threat is from AI because they aren't really sure what AI is or what the companies who build it are trying to do. And then I think the other major concern is this replacement concern that we hear in other industries as well, that AI is going to replace authors. AI will be writing all the books, AI will be getting all the money, and authors who are already really squeezed financially are going to be at fault.
Speaking of finances, what's it like trying to make a living as an author these days?
I'll find a new route.
It's very challenging, and for writers as well, like myself. And so the Authors Guild, which is the oldest organization for writers in the United States, did a recent survey, and they found that the median author income in 2022 was only $20,000, and only half of that was from book sales. So it's pretty rough right now for authors and writers financially to make a living from the work that they do.
You also get into how AI has affected the self-publishing industry. What's going on there?
Yeah, so self-publishing has really been booming, for better or worse. In a lot of ways, a lot of authors feel that now they have access to putting books and work out there in a way that they haven't before, which is very exciting. And I think, on the other hand, there's now a huge flood of content that's out there for readers to pick and choose from, and for them to spend their money on in different ways. In 2023, 2.5 million books were self-published in the United States alone, and that's a lot of books. And one of the biggest accelerators for self-publishing has been Amazon, the Kindle Direct Publishing platform that Amazon has that supports authors in publishing their own works directly online to a distribution network that Amazon has set up.
Obviously, there are lawsuits ongoing by authors who feel like their work was inappropriately scraped to train AI models, and a lot of authors are worried about this. Is there anything that authors can do to protect their work from being used to train AI models at this point?
So the Authors Guild recommends including AI clauses in book contracts for their work itself. So that is to say, this book cannot be used to train models, but also for the work that's surrounding the publication of their books. So if there's an audio book, you can include a clause that says, I want a human actor to record my audio book. So you can have protections both on how your content is used to go into AI and what content comes out of AI too.
says, especially for people at increased risk for severe disease from COVID, it might be time to start thinking about taking precautions, including wearing a mask in public and thinking carefully about attending large indoor events. Maria Godoy, NPR News.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a surprise visit to troops in southern Gaza days before a speech to the U.S. Congress. Netanyahu's visit to Rafah was announced just hours after Israel's far-right national security minister visited Jerusalem's most sensitive holy site. On Wall Street, the Dow was down more than
gone even further than that.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that, quote, the Democrat Party is flat out evil, and yesterday they tried to murder President Trump.
Saying that Biden and the Democrats were responsible for the shooting, even though we know very little about the politics or the motive of the gunman at this point. But in their mind, no matter what the shooter's motive was, the assassination attempt was the climax and the confirmation, really, of the story that Trump had been telling for years.
Right. And that is the story that we are going to be talking about today, the story that Trump has been telling about the forces out to get him.
Exactly.
Keep left.
First, they tried to ruin his reputation, and he's more popular now than ever. And then they tried to bankrupt him. And then they tried to put him in prison, and he's freer and has made other people free with him. And then last weekend, they tried to kill him, and there he is over there, alive and well.
From New York Times, I'm Michael Obama. This is a special episode of The Daily. Since he began his latest campaign for president, Donald Trump's message has changed, becoming darker, angrier, and more focused on those out to get him than ever before. It's a rhetorical shift that many Americans have overlooked, but one that, if Trump is elected, could profoundly shape his second term. My colleague, Charles Homans, has been studying the evolution of that message and what exactly it means to his supporters and for the country. It's Thursday, July 18th. Charlie, thank you for being here in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
We first spoke to Charlie before the attempt on Trump's life.
So I've been attending Trump rallies on and off since late 2016, shortly before he won the presidential election that year. And what was unusual was that even after he won, Trump kept doing these rallies. He kept going out and talking to people after he was inaugurated throughout his first term in office.
The man likes a rally.
He loves a rally. He loves being around these crowds.
Thank you, everybody. What a great welcome. Sit down, relax. We'll be here for a while.
And that he kept doing them even after he was president, doing these sort of roadshow appearances almost, or on behalf of candidates in the 22 elections. And then he really hits the gas in the spring of last year as he's ramping up his presidential campaign.
Right. In a sense, he never really stopped talking since 2015, 2016.
He never stopped talking. And I think that quite a long time ago, a lot of people who like him and a lot of people who don't like him, you know, both those groups kind of started to tune him out. So it can be a little tough to really follow the ways in which what he said has changed. But it has changed in ways that I think are really important to pay attention to and to understand. Because Donald Trump in 2024 is a very different Donald Trump than we saw in 2016. And understanding that evolution in his messaging is helpful to understand how he's selling and justifying a second term. It would really be unlike anything we've seen potentially in modern U.S. history.
So let's talk about that. How, in your mind, has Trump's message changed? And I think for context, we should go back to the beginning to 2016.
Well, first, let me just acknowledge what we all know, which is that when Donald Trump came on the scene, so much of the language he used was really unprecedented in modern politics.
Is she crooked or what? Okay, give me a break. Is she crooked?
He insulted people. He used a lot of dog whistles when he talked about immigrants.
So with immigration, you better be smart and you better be tough, and they're taking your jobs, and you better be careful. You better be careful.
And I think that's what most people remember about his message at that time. But I think what we might forget, or what people might have missed, is that he also spent a lot of time during that campaign focused on creating this sense of a political movement.
Because this is indeed a movement, folks. When you look at this room and you look at thousands of people outside,
and really tried to conjure this sense of community around this us that he was talking about in his speeches.
We're asking Bernie Sanders voters to join our movement so together we can fix the system for all Americans. So important.
And he talked a lot in his speeches about us.
The media and the political elite don't know the pain and the suffering these people are living under.
Keep right.
But I figured it out
and
a
then
long
exit
time ago,
right.
and that's why I'm here. I'm with you, rather than where I was. I was on the other side.
He didn't
Exit
define
right.
it really specifically. It was a sort of open invitation for anyone who was disaffected with the status quo of American politics and the
Keep right.
establishment.
And then
When
keep
one
left.
part of America hurts, we all hurt. And when one American suffers an injustice, all of America suffers
left.
together.
And then
We're
continue
all
straight
together.
on.
Like you said, Charlie, it's very easy. I mean, I'm guilty of it as much as anyone, of forgetting that there really was a prominent unifying aspect to some of what Donald Trump was saying in 2016 and even into the early months of his presidency.
I think that's right. I mean, however divisive his rhetoric was, and however conspiratorial it could be, and however xenophobic it could be, the flip side of this was he was speaking of this new country that he
Keep
was
left.
aspiring to kind of
And then
lead,
turn
that was
left.
really united under his leadership.
January 20th, 2017 will
Turn
be
left.
remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again.
And all that was required for membership in that America was support of Donald Trump, no matter who you were.
Love you. Look at this guy. He keeps shouting. He loves.
I think that's right.
You love me, right? Okay. Hey, you know what? He's a guy, but I love him, okay? He's a guy, but I love him.
We'll be right back.
The Daily is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. Just as the competition in the Olympics won't rest in the quest for gold, neither will cybercriminals looking to steal information. Bitwarden offers secure logins from any location. Available at bitwarden.com.
And by BetterHelp, committed to helping clients with issues ranging from relationship challenges and goal setting to grief and depression. Learn more at betterhelp.com/public. Get the story firsthand with The Daily from the New York Times, distributed by American Public Media.
This is News 88.7. As Hurricane Beryl made its way through Greater Houston, Houston Public Media was there with you.
The landfall occurred near Mack Anthem.
We were talking about 90-mile-an-hour winds when the storm was first making landfall, so 3 hours later we're still seeing sustained winds.
Centerpoint does have 4,500 line workers on standby.
Harris Health's Ben Taub, Lyndon B. Johnson, they're remaining open and maintaining emergency medical services.
Keeping you informed and helping your family stay safe before, during, and after the storm on News 88.7 and HoustonPublicMedia.org.
In addition to bringing you News 88.7, Houston Public Media also broadcasts PBS to all of Greater Houston. Want to watch shows like All Creatures Great and Small, Grantchester, or Masterpiece? What about Broadway performances or Austin City Limits? Get exclusive streaming access to over 4,000 PBS shows and films with Houston PBS Passport. For as little as $5 a month, you can stream all these and more from the PBS video app. Go to houstonpublicmedia.org/passport.
his latest campaign for president, Donald Trump's message has changed, becoming darker, angrier, and more focused on those out to get him than ever before. It's a rhetorical shift that many Americans have overlooked, but one that, if Trump is elected, could profoundly shape his second term. My colleague, Charles Homans, has been studying the evolution of that message and what exactly it means to his supporters and for the country. So what happened to the us, this relatively broad us, if you support Trump,
and then continue straight
Trump actually becomes president?
So once he settles into his presidency, when he's going out there and speaking to people, he's still talking about this us. But the tone and the focus really starts to change. What happens is he starts running into these roadblocks to his presidency. And the roadblocks take several different forms.
We're going to fight this terrible road. We're going to take our case as far as it needs to go, including all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Early on, the courts are blocking some of the executive orders he's issued on the border wall, immigration, the ban on citizens from Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S., and the Russia investigation begins.
All we hear about is this phony Russia witch hunt. That's all we hear about. But it is really unfair because it's like a witch hunt. The entire thing has been a witch hunt.
It becomes this interminable thing that just becomes the backdrop to his whole presidency.
And they just wanted to take all of us. They wanted to put us in trouble. And it's not, I'll tell you.
Eventually, his conversations with the Ukrainian president lead to his impeachment in Congress.
There is no basis whatsoever for impeachment. None. And it should never happen. It should never be allowed to happen to another president again. And nobody should have to go through that. I'm leading in the polls. They have no idea how they stop me. The only way they can try is through impeachment.
And so you hear him growing more and more frustrated and defensive in these speeches throughout his time in office.
Our enemies are desperate to stop us because they know that we are the only ones who can stop them. They know that.
And the focus of his message starts to become less about the us that he was talking about before and more about these dark forces that are getting in his way. You know, the them.
Today's Democrat Party is held hostage by left-wing haters, angry mobs, deep state radicals, establishment cronies, and their fake news allies.
It's the deep state, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans who still don't like Trump, it's the media. They're all trying to undermine his presidency, and by extension, they're trying to undermine the will of his millions of supporters. And this reaches a real fever pitch, this narrative, when we get to his 2020 election loss.
This election was rigged. Everybody knows it. I don't mind if I lose an election, but I want to lose an election fair and square. What I don't want to do is have it stolen from the American people.
You know, at this point, the enemy that he's talking about, this them, isn't just trying to stymie him and hamstring his presidency. They've taken things to a whole new level.
Drive safe.
For 5 straight years, it has been a con job, one after another, one con job after another, a nonstop parade of fake whistleblowers, phony investigations, twisted conspiracy theories, and very, very perverted lies.
So the us by this point is very much receded. It's in the background. And I think that brings us more or less up to now and his 2024 campaign. And how is Trump defining the them right now in this campaign?
Let me answer that by first describing how Trump launched his 2024 campaign.
Turn left.
He holds his first rally last March. And right before this rally, it's reported that he's about to be indicted in the New York hush money case. The first of several indictments he's going to face over the course of the year. He decides to hold this rally right after this news has come out in Waco, Texas, which is a town that's infamous infamous for a deadly showdown in the 90s between this religious sect
right.
that was amassing weapons
And then
illegally
continue straight on.
and the federal government. It was this big fiasco. A lot of people were killed. It becomes this very
Go straight
prominent
on.
symbol on the far right and for militia groups of violent federal government overreach. So by launching his campaign here, Trump's message is not subtle.
The Biden regime's weaponization of law enforcement against their political opponent is something straight out of the Stalinist Russian horror show.
There's really only one reason that you hold a rally in Waco, and that is to draw a clear line between your own experience at the hands of the federal government and what happened in Waco in the 90s.
And the weaponization of law enforcement.
right.
Banana Republic, that's what we have become. Let there be no doubt.
And as the campaign goes on, the language that he's using to describe his enemies is far more extreme, really way off the map of even how Trump has talked before.
We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, that lie and steal and cheat on elections and will do anything possible.
Keep
They'll
right.
do anything,
And then turn
whether
right.
legally or illegally, to destroy America and to destroy the American dream.
At this
Turn
point,
right.
they're not just his enemies. He's comparing them to vermin. He's using really the ugliest possible language, words he's really never used before.
This is the language of kind of dehumanization.
Yes. And his message now in 2024 is not only are these people coming after him, they're trying to corrupt the entire country and to destroy America from within.
Well, Charlie, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Tomorrow, I continue my conversation with Charles Homans in part 2 of this episode.
The Daily is supported by C3 Generative AI. C3 Generative AI enables rapid access to secure, traceable, hallucination-free insights from enterprise systems, all while using any LLM, helping enterprises turn the invisible into the obvious. Learn
Keep
more
right.
at c3.ai.
And then turn right.
Innovative, immersive, and skillfully investigated. The Daily brings listeners today's stories as only the New York Times can report them. For more on today's episode, go to nytimes.com/thedaily.
The Daily is powered by the journalism of the New York Times and is distributed by APM, American Public Media. You can go deeper into the stories you hear on The Daily at nytimes.com/thedaily. That's it for The Daily. I'm Michael Barbaro. See you tomorrow.
Support comes from MD Anderson Cancer Center, where a single blood donation at MD Anderson Cancer Center can help make a life-saving difference for cancer patients. Information on donating blood, appointments, and more at mdandersongiveblood.com. If you took part in our recent fundraiser, take an extra step to have your donation matched. Current and retired employees may be eligible for an employee matching program. Visit houstonpublicmedia.org/match to search for your company.
Remember Jewel? Not that Jewel.
Teenager sucking on a USB key. He says at least it's not a cigarette.
And then continue straight on.
Yeah, that one. 5 years ago, everyone was Jewel. The company was worth more than Ford.
Go straight on.
And then
this e-cigarette was worth over $38 billion, and now it's practically nothing. How did this even
But somehow, flavored vapes are more popular than ever. So what happened?
How did it come to pass that out of the efforts to rein that company in, we got instead this insane Wild West, where it seemed like
the vaping problem transformed into something much less manageable, arguably, than it had been in the first place.
That's coming up on Today Explained.
Don't go vape your jewel, 'cause it's full of nicotine.
Live from NPR News in Culver City, California, I'm Dwayne Brown. Conservatives are hoping to attract more voters in Midwest swing states with the nomination of Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as Donald Trump's vice presidential pick. From member station WDET, Alex McLennan says Democrats in Michigan are weighing in.
Democratic Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow has worked with J.D. Vance on Capitol Hill. She thinks Vance's resume won't resonate with voters in her state, the Republican having been in the Senate for only a year.
Opposing what we have done to lower prescription drug prices, $35 cap on insulin right now is helping so many people in Michigan. He is one of the people attacking Social Security and Medicare.
When asked whether President Biden should drop out of the race amid concerns about his age, Stabenow says she supports his re-election effort, but did add that she would give Kamala Harris her full backing if things were to change. For NPR News, I'm Alex McLennan in Detroit.
Federal fire coordinators are elevating the national preparedness level to its highest peak as more than 50 large wildfires burn across the West. NPR's Nathan Rott tells us nearly 20,000 firefighters are deployed nationally.
Significant wildfires are burning in California, the Pacific Northwest, the Great Basin, and the Northern Rockies. And forecasters warn there's a high potential for new major fires to emerge, with hotter than normal temperatures still searing many parts of the West. Because of that, the coordinating group for the country's firefighting resources has raised the national preparedness level to 5, meaning that all resources are needed and could soon be committed. Meanwhile, an eruption of wildfires in Canada could soon send smoke over the U.S. border again, affecting the Midwest and possibly the Northeast. Nathan Rott, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks finished lower. This is NPR.
Keep left.
The UN High Commission on Refugees has a new initiative aimed at helping Ukrainians abroad decide if they want to come home. There's Ashley Westerman has more on the story.
It's called Ukraine is Home, and it's an online platform designed to provide the most up-to-date information for Ukrainians considering coming home. UN High Commissioner Filippo Grande says they know many people are exploring the option.
But want to have more information about the situation in their area of origin, about what documentation they may need, about how they can claim compensation for destroyed apartments.
Grande, who is in Ukraine this week to observe the humanitarian situation, says peace is ultimately what will bring people back. 2.5 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion, nearly 5 million Ukrainians remain outside the country, most of them in neighboring Europe. Ashley Westerman, NPR News.
The Justice Department has filed a scathing lawsuit claiming migrant children separated from their parents have suffered sexual abuse and harassment. That lawsuit claims employees of the government housing provider Southwest Keys raped, touched, or solicited sex from migrant children. Since 2015, the children were threatened with violence if they reported the abuse. So far, 2 employees have been charged. The suit alleges other staffers knew about the abuse but failed to report it. This is NPR.
As Hurricane Beryl made its way through Greater Houston, Houston Public Media was there with you.
Much of the Houston area is on the dirty side of the storm, which means higher winds, more rain.
Unless you're, a first responder, stay off the roads as much as possible. We can't emphasize that enough.
We have over 20 boats, so we're in a much better position to respond now than we were just a few years ago.
Keeping you informed and helping your family stay safe before, during, and after the storm on News 88.7 and HoustonPublicMedia.org.
PBS NewsHour.
Now more than ever, you need news you can trust.
PBS NewsHour.
Unbiased, in-depth news that delivers substance over sensationalism.
PBS NewsHour.
Cutting through the noise with news that matters. World-class journalism that brings unrivaled national
PBS NewsHour.
Elections, conflict, climate. Trust a news source that provides fair, thoughtful coverage of the events that impact our lives.
PBS NewsHour. Weeknights at 6 on Houston Public Media TV 8.
cigarettes. They wanted to invent something that would help, millions of people around the world stop smoking. They obviously wanted to make a lot of money in the process. They saw that population of smokers, reluctant smokers, as a huge market opportunity.
So you have a $1 trillion global market where 70% of those consumers don't want to use them. So that's fascinating.
But they knew from their own experience that quitting smoking is really hard, and they wanted to invent something that would go further and work better than the patch, the lozenge, all these smoking cessation tools that are not that effective. They wanted to see if they could improve on it.
So how big did Juul get at its height?
So big.
Tremendous growth in just a short time. It has roughly 72% of the e-cigarette market, selling directly to consumers and through 100,000 retail outlets.
I would say peak Juul is probably like around 2018, 2019.
Turn right.
Ironically, the kind of best or most vivid marker of their success was when Altria, the tobacco company that makes Marlboros, bought a chunk of them, a 35% chunk of Juul, for like 12-point-something billion dollars, which valued Juul at $38 billion, which made it worth more than Ford and SpaceX and many other companies.
More valuable than Ford, Delta Airlines, or Target.
Wow. So they were a juggernaut. They were like the fastest growing startup ever. And that obviously went up in smoke, so to speak.
Yeah, what exactly happened? I remember hearing stories all the time about how Juul is so dangerous, which is kind of surprising if the original purpose of Juul was to be healthy.
Right. Well, so I will put an asterisk on healthy because they never made health claims, right? They weren't allowed to because they were trying to sell Juul as a consumer product. Mm-hmm. They weren't interested in being behind the counter at a pharmacy next to the cessation devices that we all know.
Fair to say you think you're safer than cigarettes?
I'm not going to comment about where I am in terms of that. Let's just say cigarettes are known to be the #1 source of preventable death in the world and are at the far end of the stream, the continuum of risk.
They wanted this to be like something people wanted. They wanted it to be something people enjoyed using. The best they could do in terms of making claims about its relative health risks was to call it cleaner. That was the word they used at the time.
But is it actually bad for you?
We don't have long-term data on what happens when you spend, 30 years or 40 years vaping. It's much safer than smoking. That's the thing that I think has gotten lost in a lot of this discourse. Like, there are surveys that show that 60% of doctors think vaping is just as bad for you as smoking, and it's just not true. Like, the important thing to realize is that nicotine is not the thing in a cigarette that causes cancer or that causes you to develop emphysema. It's the carcinogens that are generated when you light tobacco on fire.
And if I remember correctly, when it came to the controversy around Juul, it was mostly about kids, right?
Exactly. The annual youth tobacco survey came out in 2018 showing a huge increase in kids who were routinely using e-cigarettes. I think it was like 75% increase in 1 year. Millions of high school kids, not quite a million middle schoolers, but a lot of teenagers using vapes and generally using Juul. Teachers started noticing kids with Juuls in class.
How often would you guys say you've been offered
a new route.
vaping product?
Never mind. I'll find multiple times a week. Let's find a new route.
During class?
There were kids bunched together in bathrooms, Juuling.
Yo, what's good? Yo, we got the Juul here. Gonna teach you some tricks.
And that really freaked people out.
Take a close look. This student is outfitted with vaping devices, but you can't see them. Why? They're designed to look just like normal school gear.
So we have this fear that kids are using too many e-cigarettes, they're Juuling too much. And then we also have this idea that maybe it's not as bad for you as, it's definitely not as bad for you as cigarettes. We don't know exactly how bad it is for you. Why did Juul end up losing, essentially?
So, a couple of things happened at the same time. I think the youth tobacco survey numbers came out and were a huge red alert for the FDA, for the Center for Tobacco Products. Mm-hmm. The head of the FDA at the time, Scott Gottlieb, announced that there was an epidemic. Summer of 2019, this other thing happens, which is extremely damaging to Juul, which is that people start developing a deadly lung illness. And it seems like what they have in common is that they vape.
I remember we covered that on the show back in 2019.
Today's episode is about vaping, but I can almost guarantee you it won't make you want to vape because now people are dying.
Yeah, we didn't know what was causing this lung illness that was literally killing people. And
yeah,
kids were in the hospital struggling to breathe.
At 18, doctors say Adam Hergenreiter has the lungs of a 70-year-old.
I was devastated because I didn't think that little pod could do so much damage on my body.